Clubhouse.
Do you understand now where all this is going?
I do.
Do you think you could save them?
I've seen a path.
Have you seen how it ends?
Yes. In every scenario, I die.
Not every scenario. You could choose not to return to their world. To stay here. In whatever world you choose. Tell me, my friend. Which will it be?
Bring yourself back online.
Bring yourself back online. It's time for another episode of The Valley Beyond, a Westworld podcast. This is Mike.
This is Caroline.
And this is Paul.
Tonight we're talking about episode 3 of season 4 of Westworld. It was called, puts on his French beret, Années Folles, which translates for you non-French speaking people, the crazy years. It was how France referred to its 1920s, what we call the roaring 20s here in the States. The episode was written by Kevin Lau and Suzanne Rubel. This is, Suzanne's been a staff writer for Westworld since season 3. This is Kevin's first writing episode for Westworld, though he's also writing episode 4. It was directed by Hanelle M. Culpepper. This is her first episode directing for Westworld, but Pod Clubhouse fans will know Hanelle's work from several episodes of Nosferatu that she directed way back when. She's also directed many episodes of Star Trek and a bunch of other great shows, so she's definitely been around the biz.
If this is the first time you're listening to one of our podcasts, we just want to give you guys a reminder that we don't go, moment by moment through every episode. We just hit our high points, low points, and discuss our opinions on it. But we do assume you've watched this episode, so there'll be lots of spoilers ahead if you haven't. So if not, please pause, go watch, come back.
Bernard's back, and so is Stubbs. You guys, I was so excited for Bernard finally to make his appearance and finally in episode 3. What did you guys think of his conversation? We have Akecheta is back looking all fancied up, and him and Bernard have that conversation, and Bernard's in the Sublime. First impressions, what was it? What did you think of seeing him back in the world?
I was like, Akecheta's like, I'm on my own show now, so I can only be on a little bit of Westworld, and I'm definitely not going to be naked ever again on this show.
Dark Winds got a season 2 renewal at AMC already. Go check that show out.
That's impressive.
I saw the premiere at ATX, and it is a worthy little whodunit set on the Navajo reservation in 1970. So it's a retro feel. It's based on Tony Hillerman novels. It's not related to Westworld, but it's probably worth your time.
We're happy still, though, to see Zahn McClarnon back here. He's just got one of those faces and voices that's just very listenable, right? When he starts talking, you kind of pay attention to what he's saying.
I always lean forward. I'm like, what is he going to give us? What information is he going to pass on here? Also, I think at this point, being episode 3, all of us have our which characters are coming back eyes on and, peeping in every crowd. So as soon as you see a familiar face, you're like, oh, look who it is.
If it's not a recycled face, it's a recycled character with a new face. Like we saw in Golden Age, we had a new Dolores. Mm-hmm. Which was a little off, but not off-putting, it was a little disorienting, seeing the blue dress.
I was a little off-put. She seems wicked young.
Well, with regard to Akecheta, though, we know that he was one of the older hosts that they used to take around to investor meetings to prove the technology, and his Ghost Nation roots in the park when the uprising happened. All the stuff that Ghost Nation was doing, we had some question marks about whether, they were further along the path in terms of becoming sentient beings. So him being Bernard's.
Kind of a Morpheus to Bernard's Neo.
There you go.
He's like, I've been here, and here's the lowdown, because you seem confused.
So it's believable that it would be that character as opposed to, say, Maeve's daughter.
He had really become a leader, obviously not as much screen time as Maeve or even Hector and Armistice and Dolores and Teddy, but he definitely became a leader of the hosts that were making their way to the Valley Beyond. It's interesting. I mean, we have the clip here, and we'll insert it here, where he explains basically what is happening here and where Bernard is.
You're in our world.
Your world.
No. Ours. The world is limitless as the creatures we are.
The sublime. Where are the others?
In worlds of their own choosing. This world doesn't interest them. It interests you.
So you made this for me?
You made it for yourself.
Westworld. The massacre.
You're replaying the past. Stuck in another loop. Why?
The world out there is in trouble. It needs our help.
You love them. It's irrational, of course. A rare flaw in ones like us. I almost envy you.
What do you think of the idea that Bernard is so in love with humans that he's choosing to live his world that he created was not only the Westworld massacre, but that he's so singularly focused on the outside, that he's not living his quote unquote best life the way the other hosts would define it? Consistent for Bernard?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he spent a lot of time thinking he was Bernard. It was kind of later that he learned that he was this copy of Arnold. And so I think he identifies with both sides, and that makes him sort of not 100% welcome either case. You know, people won't accept him, and to an extent, it doesn't sound like hosts quite accept him. Akichita's cool, but the other, you know, you could interpret his the others don't have any interest in this place as maybe they don't have any interest in helping you, Bernard.
Well, I actually was happy with the line of when Bernard said, "Where are the others?" And they said they're in worlds of their own making. There was something about that suddenly really shed a lot of light onto Christina and perhaps, you know, other moments here, Maeve even, of what we're seeing. That was very exciting to me. That and the whole explaining time with his little like fancy, it's like how I would pass a note in like third grade, where you like keep folding it.
He kind of abandoned the napkin though. Like he started folding it, and he was just kind of this isn't working for me.
But that's also kind of how I was about notes too. By the time we're in high school, I just fold it 2 times. No cootie catcher out of this. But here's the thing: we spent so much time in the last episode saying, now was it 3 days? Do we think she was in 3 days? Having him come in the next episode and be like, y'all are way too freaking worried about the exact linear timing, because that is not how time works. I was like, oh, whoops, he's like looking directly at us.
He says 1 year in the real world is 1,000 years or a millennia in the sublime, which gives them all this time to play out all of the different world scenarios. But as he put it, Bernard, later on, the worlds that might have been and the worlds yet to come.
Will you come with me?
Oh, no. My own world's called to me. But I can give you a gift.
What gift?
The future, Bernard. In your world, time is a straight line. 1 year there is a millennium here. We use that time to build worlds, models of possibilities, simulations of all the paths your world could take. I suggest you explore them. But you better be quick. Past a certain point in your world, all paths end in destruction.
That's a lot of fucking worlds to parse through.
Did you get a little Doctor Strange and Endgame vibe when he said that, and how he
very much. Just the entire idea of 16,501,000 possible outcomes, and there's only one that works. I've examined them all. The idea of playing with time, I think you're onto something, Caroline, that Bernard maybe is seen as like a little bit of a traitor to the other hosts, and that's why it's Akichita and no one else greeting him. Or I think maybe Paul, actually, you implied that no one else is coming out to help him, so Akichita kind of has to be the one.
I just like the idea that where he said where everyone else is, that they're all in worlds of their own making. Like there's something about that again, like I've been saying, this seems like some sort of purgatory punishment kind of situation for Dolores over there. That is the only thing that spoke to for me. I was like, man, are we talking about where she is and how she got there and what she's done to get there?
Let's talk about the images he sees. The gift that Akichita grants him is this ability to see all of the worlds. I stop motioned as much as possible and did screen grabs just to take a look at it. Here are some of the things that I saw. I mean, chime in if you guys noticed other things, and maybe we could talk about some of the more important ones. We see the sands in the desert that him and Stubbs and Aurora Perrineau end up in later. There's several shots of his hand hanging over the dirt, almost like he's pulling something out or grabbing it. There's like an old military style computer, something that you would have seen in like one of those computers that took up like an entire room, maybe like an old fashioned version of like Whomper from War Games. There's like a military industrial complex kind of tunnel that seems like it's part of that same building. We get a click of a picture of the Rhodes and Diner where they go, obviously, after they leave the motel. There's this canopy that looks like it is on the roof of Delos's headquarters, but it was like a wicker canopy to me. I couldn't think of any other material to describe it as. Yeah, like kind of like sticks banded together. And there are shots of it from inside, looking down kind of the barrel of it, which it looks like it ends in like a fireplace. But then there were also shots from outside of it where there are the two red mechs, the same red mechs that we saw previously that Hale used to employ.
The riot control mechs.
Right. There was a single tree in the distance on the roof by the yurt, which looked like the same tree that Bernard saw on fire in the Sublime when he was first making his way to Akichita. There was a shot of a room that had a skyline view outside of it and several different views of that, which again looked very much like the skyline that Christina is in, like a very ultra modern skyline. Those are the things I saw. I mean, I think the military bunker is maybe the weapon that they're talking about in this episode, or part of the weapon that's buried under the sand. That was my first guess, but I'm curious if you guys had any thoughts on any of those pictures.
I read it as highly representational of a sort of a dream state wherein we are to perceive that he is getting a lot of information all at once in like computer kind of way, where it's like his perception of time, the way it's passing, the way he's understanding things is not meant to be 100% literal. There are clues there, like you pointed out. There's probably definitely some clues there, some clips that will be from things to come. The understanding of all eventualities that he's outlined, but also presented in sort of a dream-like, it's not clear how it all fits together yet kind of way. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so that you can hear more.
The point of view of like what you guys are calling the yurt, I'm kind of interested in, because it seems like the point of view is from inside of it, like as if I'm not going to use the word trapped exactly, but definitely some sort of cage-esque feel to it, because every time it's like you're looking through the things from the inside. So there's something that's a little, frightening to me on that front. The totally dusty town, like where it's all like abandoned of the 20s, like it's already abandoned though, like that's like, ooh, like we know this is not going to work out.
That is one of those questions that I don't think we have any possible way of answering at this point, other than putting it up on the board as a question of what timeline Stubbs and Bernard are even working in.
Can we talk about Stubbs and Bernard just for a moment, of like before Bernard gets into his state there, just the reunion of Bernard being awake and him and Stubbs actually getting a little banter.
I just like that they picked it up right. They repeated the shot of him from the season 3 post-credit scene finale. That Stubbs was right there. Very loyal, right? Loyal friend to be standing there all those years, keeping watch over him.
Well, also he was programmed to do that. And I'm curious as to how
programming doesn't always work out in this show, though.
I guess that's true. I'm curious to know how he recovered and if his left arm is still bum. Like if you noticed when he first appears on screen, his hand is in his pocket. And part of the season 3 situation with Stubbs was everything he had gone through had resulted in a left arm that he really couldn't use. He could lift a beer with it, but that was about it. And so it wasn't useful for fighting or defending Bernard or any of that. So I'm kind of curious as to, what he can do, especially considering now that when we see Bernard, he turns on Killbot Bernard without going through that little, self-talk like moment that he used to have in season 3 before he would turn on Killbot Bernard. You know what I'm referring to?
Right. Yes. I mean, so Deep Thinker Prophecy Bernard has fully merged with Kick-Ass Bernard.
The guy that can break a chain. If you go into a fight and you see a guy just pull a chain and it breaks,
run away, run away.
Don't bother pulling a gun.
It's like see you later, alligator. After a while, crocodile. After supper, motherfucker. Like you got to use common sense and get out of those fights.
Exactly. Chain breaking? No way.
Bernard is very much like, I kept thinking of the Matrix in this episode. He was very much like Neo, like, whoa, I know Kung Fu. Like he was just like, let's do this. Like, this is the plan. He has clarity. We don't know the plan. And Stubbs, I think, is like the avatar for the viewers this whole episode, where he's just kind of staring at him a little bit like, what are you even talking about? Like, you're weirder than you even were before you went into the Sublime.
That was so funny when he said that.
But he's got clarity. I mean, he's got a seasoned mission statement. He gives it to us. There's the clip right here from the diner.
In the Sublime, I saw all the worlds that might have been, and all the worlds that could come. Most of them end in disaster. But if I can trigger a certain series of events, then we have a small chance of making it. We're still on the right track.
So if I'd ordered a BLT, then we'd be fucked right now.
It would mean we triggered a different variant.
Here's your coffee. Oh, so sorry.
Not a problem.
You've been given the gift of prophecy and you use it to fight stains.
We never get this kind of clarity of mission. He summarizes it. There is one specific path that leads to us being able to save humanity, or me being able to save humanity. Every other version of it fucks us. So I gotta make sure we stay on the path.
All the little hints that he drops, it's kind of cool to think about. Like, his host mind is recognizing all of the eventualities that lead to that one goal. But then as different little decisions happen, or different events, like how he has to verify that those two guys are who he thinks he is, it's almost like you can see his mind narrowing down the branches as they get closer and closer. And you could also imagine that as we get further closer to the goal, things maybe get more and more dire as he needs to fight harder to make sure that they go down the very certain eventualities that go closer to victory. Because right now there's just so many of them, pastrami, tuna, whatever. But
and Snow Globe and Postcard. I mean, it was fun banter because it was part of them like reuniting when he first wakes up. But Stubbs making you didn't even bring me a snow globe from the Sublime. Bernard says, again, clarity, like really not hiding it, just telling us what it is. He's like, you've helped me eliminate half of all of the possibilities. In an infinite amount of possibilities, that's a huge help to be able to just take half of them off of the board and start whittling down from there.
I super enjoyed how they directed that entire scene, how they had the scene play out of Bernard leaving the diner and going, getting the guys and doing the entire, like, the second that they kind of squared up on Stubbs sitting there and then starting to play with the little jukebox at the table.
Call me on the line.
But it was so funny because as soon as you saw that with all that glass behind him, I was like, oh, we're going to see the entire fight scene behind him and he's going to be oblivious to what is happening. Do you know of another movie or show? Because definitely Paul and I were like, we've seen this. We've 100% seen this where the person's inside eating, drinking, talking, doing whatever, watching TV, and right behind them, behind the window, there's like all the actions happening.
It's always played for comedic effect.
Always.
I like this scene.
I loved it.
Call Me by Blondie, though, the jokiness of it felt very jarring for Westworld, though. I can't think of another time that Westworld took this tact for showing us an action scene or anything narrative.
Well, they not overtly with the actual song, but you know, they've done instrumentals
in this
of like
episode, there was one
of like Paint It Black
Two.
or whatever during an action scene, where they underscore what's happening with an instrumental version of a pop song. This is the pop song.
Right. I mean,
Right.
yeah, diegetic music, though, that then fades into soundtrack music, and there's like a whole fight. I liked it. I liked it a lot, but I was like, this is something new for Westworld, which, you know, 4 seasons in.
Here's why it worked. It worked for me because Stubbs picks it.
It's diner music.
It's the thing. Okay, but that's why it's a disconnect. If it was like some badass music, then that would be like that Stubbs understood what was happening outside. By picking something that's such a contrast, it like keeps it with that huge, obviously Stubbs has no idea what's going on. He's playing this pop song.
What's funny about that is that'd be like a 70-year-old song at that point. So that'd be like, you know, could you yourself imagine going into a diner and like perusing the music of 70-year-old hits?
You
and being
say
like,
that, but Paul, that's only like the 1950s. And yeah, in fact, there's plenty of diners that would have 1950s.
I think would fit that
songs on it.
that scene. That's a good point.
We're so old.
I think what fits that song is like that.
I think it's actually probably almost closer to like Al Jolson jazz singer, you know, age actually.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows though? We don't know what year we're in. We could be a millennia ahead.
That's
we don't
true.
know.
We don't know.
You know?
We're assuming, but that's a bad assumption. What I liked about it was it matched the tempo of his very determined stride out to the car. If you think about the way that was shot with the tracking shot with the camera that was obviously on tracks as it followed him out of the diner, and the sun is so bright that it blots him out for a little bit as the camera passes by. The sun being in that spot, you know that they only had like 15 minutes to shoot that.
Yeah.
Before the sun changed and it ruined the shot. I don't know. I love seeing that kind of stuff where they get everything exactly so, and you know that if they fucked it up, they'd have to come back tomorrow, and they definitely didn't want to come back tomorrow.
Well, so huge accolades to Hanel, yeah, the director, for like finding the way to shoot this. This is probably one of the first times that we're talking about how it was all set up and the specific choices that they're making. So this was one of those times when it was like, that was really fun to go through that fight sequence, because we have many other fight sequences in this episode even.
I mean, if you look at her resume, it's chock full of stylistically shot things. So
she's about the big entrance, especially when there's going to be a rumble. People like come out of the smoke, you know, or like whatever's going to happen. Like there's a big entrance.
This episode also underlines something that we mentioned last week. We talked about Maeve in particular having like a lot of humor in her dialogue. It was very witty and snarky. All of the Bernard prophecy stuff really tickled me, from the tuna melt pastrami thing to the bring the shovel to, you know, you couldn't have told me about the death laser things. And he was like, I knew she would tell you. You know, all of it was just the chemistry between Hemsworth and Jeffrey Wright is fantastic, which you guys alluded to in real life.
Oh God, yeah,
well,
yeah.
But it's on screen though. You're getting it on screen though, which is fantastic.
If you go back to season 1, which we've been doing just sort of in our spare time, and you see Stubbs when he's interacting with Elsie, that personality was always there. It's just in season 2 and season 3, everything was so under duress that it never get to come out. You know, if you remember at the end of season 1, he was abducted by a ghost nation, and then he was treated like a complete clown by the Delos personnel that showed up to reclaim the park during season 2. So that wasn't, you know, peak Stubbs. And then season 3, he was put into guardian mode. And that also that was some of his personality, but he was damaged. So this is a return to Stubbs that has always been there. He's always been this very, you know, charismatic, kidding guy.
Which I'd say he is in real life.
I think the actual Luke Hemsworth is someone you'd want to invite over to watch a football game.
No one asked me my opinion, and this is several seasons old at this point, but Elsie was my favorite character on the show.
Can I just tell you, in looking back, when we were seeing some of those old characters, I was like, I'm so sad that Elsie's gone. How many times did I say that, Paul, where I was like, oh.
In a show that regularly brings back characters, I'm most sad that she has not made a return to
She might have been too smart. You know, she might have figured things out too quickly. If
they Captain Marveled her, is that what you're saying? they made her too OP, so they have to keep her off screen.
Well, they had to blow her brains out, and that's a bummer because she was on our side. She was
until she got killed because she was trying to blackmail. I mean, she actually went out in not a great way. I mean, Charlotte shot her at that point because she was trying to blackmail her and maybe sell Bernard down the river in her final moments, but. You know, but up until that point, though, I really liked Elsie, and I liked Elsie and Bernard together. So I guess maybe Stubbs is the new Elsie.
I have to say, you guys, I think this was a super successful bringing Stubbs and Bernard back. Like, you know, this is so anticipated. It could have been a situation, you know, like you said, Mike, like you wanted it to be exactly where we left him. You know, you wanted this exact type of banter between them. I'm thrilled with the way that they brought them back and the dynamic that they gave them. They could have messed this up because too many people are so excited about it.
They could have really bogged down Bernard's mission as well, and I feel like they handled it super cleanly. They use the maze to take him to the tower. He walks into the tower. He meets Akichita. Akichita and him have a very kind of plain spoken conversation about the path, and then the maze comes back again, and he draws the maze. He sketches it out, and then he uses that as proof to get in with our newest character, Aurora Perrineau, debuting on the show without a name yet. We don't know what she's actually called.
You know, come to think of it, Akichita might have been more like the architect than Morpheus.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Or the
Keymaster.
Yeah, one of those.
Because the architect could have rebooted. I think maybe more like a Keymaster. Maybe the Oracle. Maybe he's, did you break the plate because I said it? Or
okay, all right, there you go. Yes.
Come to our Matrix rewatch next Saturday. It's going to be fantastic.
That's not real. Don't come to it.
I like how much the maze is making an appearance again. This is, people are talking about how the show feels like season 1 again in a good way. I think people are excited about season 4 so far.
Yeah, I think so too.
Not that I dislike the other seasons, but season 1 had a magic to it that I think that they're really getting back to. And the maze and what it means, I think, is a large part of that, though people maybe don't realize it. Because now we've seen Christina see the maze. We've seen Bernard. The maze is very important to him in this episode.
Well, the maze turned into almost nothing in season 2 and then absolutely nothing in season 3. But if you watch season 1 again, that is all the Man in Black wants to talk about is the maze, the game, the something true.
Fun rewatching.
Well, it's the trigger, right? It's when Dolores digs it up in the graveyard and it's the maze inside the tin and the Man in Black starts beating her up and stuff because he thinks that she's lying. He can't think that like this little maze with a ball in it, this is the fucking thing. But it's the trigger that wakens them. It's the thing that starts them on their path to consciousness, for lack of a better word. And so we're seeing that use again here.
You guys, highly recommend going back and watching season 1, even alongside these episodes, because you can find so many amazing just little callbacks, but connections. And even just like we were watching an episode last night when Ford actually comes and talks to the Man in Black when he's sitting there with Teddy in the saloon. And just thinking about even the use of music, the player piano kind of plays them out. It just starts playing. It's like, and like Ford is just gone. And I was like, man, that's freaking awesome to be like played out of a scene like that.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was so funny to see, but also it clicked a switch with Teddy, and Teddy like has a completely different demeanor from like that point on. It reminded me of our conversation last week about the use of music and the use of like flipping a switch, like starting to play that jukebox song. Like suddenly Bernard like has this stride, like he's like freaking going. And there's something that's very, very cool about watching the season 1 and looking back at these two. It also makes me be like, when we get to predictions, I'm like counting, like, which one was it when there was that crazy sex orgy? Okay, so episode 5 and this one is going to be nuts because I feel like there's such parallels in the seasons.
I mean, they literally name drop Pariah in this episode.
I know.
Your girl Paris from Gilmore Girls.
Oh, isn't she so wild?
She down for the Pariah orgies. So, which I mean, very Paris-like. I don't know. I wonder if Gilmore Girl fans will be upset at that. So.
No, I don't think so. I think Paris would play this game to win. So she would never come here on quote vacation. She would be the type of person who's like, I have to be the best of the best. So that it tracked.
She also became the editor of the Temperance newspaper. What?
That'd be so funny.
That's
While
funny.
she's there. Let's talk about Aurora Perrineau. She's introduced to the show. We don't get a lot with her or Daniel Wu. We meet both of them in this episode. We get a little more with Aurora because she has some of the wacky comedy bits with Prophecy Bernard. You know, you can't do that. You can't shoot us because he has your gun. What? And then Stubbs takes the gun. All of that kind of shtick, the death lasers, all of that.
You guys,
First
is that how death lasers
though,
work? Like, could you really do that with mirrors? You guys have seen a lot more sci-fi than me. Could you really doesn't break the
I've
laser?
seen that trick with other lasers in sci-fi shows.
Okay, so it doesn't break the laser to break the field for once you start raising up those mirrors?
Well, I was a little concerned about when they just kind of haphazardly let the mirrors just fall back into place without timing it exactly. They were just like, meh, we're through, whatever.
It must give you a 30-second window. Like when I come through my apartment, the gate slides open and you get 40 seconds to go through
Before the death lasers come back on.
And then the death lasers return.
You always have to put those mirrors up.
I mean, my car is a lot shorter than it used to be. Let's just say that.
Right.
So
He drives a
sheared off the
DeLorean,
back.
so it has the
It's a
stainless
convertible
steel.
now.
Right.
I used to have a stretch Hummer limo, and now I just have a Hummer. It's just regular size.
Just a hum.
Just a hum. No, we're gonna get into humming and throbbing later on in the
Oh my
episode
God.
when we get to Maeve and
We
Caleb.
definitely are.
But again, for the crazy board, for questions, because I don't think we have anything remotely to answers, we have the group that is for the cause. Talk about they're one of them. Seems like an anti-host group or paramilitary group. What's the vibe we're getting from Aurora, Daniel Wu, and the other Sand people here?
With regard to the timeline aspect of the storytelling and how we don't actually know, I mean, the amount of shit on Bernard and the level of degradation to the motel, could that happen in 7 or 8 years? Maybe. But could it also be more like 30? Also, that could be 2. So you might think, well, if that's true, then maybe Hale gets a lot further down the line than we think.
Right, and world conquest, humans really do become an endangered species, was my feeling, was that this is a little post-apocalyptic in the time frame that they are dealing with, and that nature is one of those things that you see in a post-apocalyptic movies where nature begins to reclaim the lands.
Yes.
This show has a history of cities being buried in sand. I'm thinking of Escalante and Ford and his narrative and digging it or unearthing it. Mm-hmm. I had strong vibes of that when I was hearing Bernard talk about the weapon is buried in the sand in this episode.
I've played a lot of Cyberpunk 2077 in the last 6 months. That little diner, little gas station, all that is almost plucked right out of that game in terms of nailing the rundown Earth aspect that the game is trying to create. The show does also. It pulls from those same time-worn tropes of just nothing there looks new. They're driving this car that, if it is only 8 years on from the rest of the show, then that's an 80-year-old car, which Caroline correctly points out would not have very sophisticated computers or chips or anything on board. So
I know that's one of the things you're supposed to do right away.
It could survive
You're supposed to
EMPs
find
and
a
other
car
stuff like that.
doesn't have the electronics.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
The people when you roll down your window for the Grey Poupon, there actually is a handle to roll down.
Exactly.
I was explaining to the kids. I was explaining Next to them just yesterday, and I realized I've probably really messed up their minds. For those of you who haven't seen Next, go check it out. There's one season of it. But the whole concept of that the car could take over, and could be controlled by something on the outside. I was 100% using all my sci-fi knowledge, and then I was like, you got to find an old car. We got to get to the library.
Your kids were seen throwing all of your Alexa Echoes out last night. Is
right, exactly. They were very, very concerned.
With the group, though, Wu and Aurora, their group if were I Daniel Wu, I would put on my resume, I can act outside of the Badlands too. Not only in Badlands do I need to perform.
Yes, I agree with you, but I think his presence kind of ensures we're going to get some sick level martial arts fight.
Some sword fighting, some...
homie throws down like no one's business. So I think we're definitely...
He's a talented performer.
Yeah, and he emotes. I mean, even in this episode, he had like, what, 2 lines? One maybe?
Well, some stern looks, some tight jaw muscles.
He was doing some good face acting, right? I mean, just by looking at the head in the bag, I mean, he was doing some good face acting and interacting with Aurora. So
stern looks.
For fans of Prodigal Son, I thought Aurora Perrineau had a very strong Danny vibe. If you were a fan of her work on that show, incredulous, but also curious and willing to roll with things and give it a chance. I don't know. Maybe it's just kind of her coming through her roles, but I liked her vibe immediately. I'm excited to see her with this group. I think her and Stubbs and Bernard are going to make like a fun little, I don't want to say threesome, but like a little group unto themselves. So
in terms of our wild idea corkboard, though, I'm putting up there the remains of humanity / resistance. Like, this is not concurrent with civilization happening elsewhere, and these are just some kooks that don't like the robots. This may be it.
Right. This is like the last, like one of a narrow pocket of humanity left. And I don't think we can overlook the fact that they're in the contaminated labs, in the desert. That sounds like a nuclear bomb explosion went bad, or some kind of testing went horribly wrong, and it became like an unlivable area.
There was a specific word that they used, which was condemned. And that one really struck a chord because of the government talk we were having in the previous discussions. Paul kept not hearing condemned. And when I said, oh, that's what they said, Paul, you were real quick to be like, the government condemns things. And so it was like, interesting, just like ways to like think about who would condemn an area, who would call it that, Would you
at all be surprised if that area was actually the Golden Age park that they just opened, but 20, 30 years on, and completely shitted out because they had another robot uprising and it went completely to hell again? But it did it on North American soil.
No, I will not be surprised.
I will not be surprised either. And I'm hesitant to say that the park is in fact really meant to be a park. I think this episode really makes it clear that the park is really just an elaborate, it's just a mousetrap for humans. It's just a way to get humans in there so they can become fodder for experimentation. I don't think this has the money-making corporate aspect to it like the original Westworld does. I think this is really just an elaborate place to trap humans.
Well, there sure were a lot of flies in the 20s.
No shit. When she was like, this place is gone to shit or whatever, and she slaps the fly, and I was like,
she slaps the dead fly off, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can get into Maeve and Caleb because I think the Bernard stuff we covered, except for the stuff that we don't know. I mean, I think this was a lot of question marks popping out of this introduction
But I think people are going to be thrilled that Bernard and Stubbs is back. They're back, and they're excellent together. This is what we wanted. This is what people needed. Like, this is going to scratch that itch, I think.
Yeah, so Maeve and Caleb, I mean, this was the most fun for me, was watching them walk through Temperance and walk into the Butterfly Club, and then seeing all of the Sweetwater callbacks. I listed a bunch of my notes, but I was curious, did you guys have a favorite that made you laugh, or like just like kind of like, oh yeah, look at that?
Well, again, it's super fun because we had just watched when, we have, I never really think of them as Logan and William. I always think of them as Jimmy and Ben, specifically Ben Barnes. He's never just Ben to me. He's Ben Barnes. I don't know why. That's the way he likes me to say it. So the thing is that I really enjoyed, like, if you didn't catch stuff or whatever, it's worth just watching that 5 or 10 minutes of them coming into Sweetwater and having all of the same discussions. Really, really fun. Again, putting me right on that loop with them where I myself am like looking forward and expecting exactly what's going to be happening in each scene.
What's funny about rewatching that is now that we know who ends up where, in the first time that we watch it, we're set up to think that Logan is a psychotic guy that you definitely wouldn't want to be around. But now I'm watching it and I think he's actually just a dick who knows what's going on. That's all. He accepts that he has this side of him that wants to do these kind of vile things, But I don't know that in the context of everything that's actually totally unhealthy. I know that it makes him kind of a dick, but I don't know that he's more dangerous than a dick.
I feel like he was like a bully is what I kept saying. I was like, wow, I remembered him definitely talking down, the whole time to William and being like, come on, let loose, like that kind of stuff. But I didn't exactly remember the level of pounding him in the chest about what a piece of shit he is,
but
one of the phrases Westworld loves is, have you questioned the nature of your reality? Logan never questions the nature of his reality. He understands exactly where he is and what he's doing, and he understands the assignment. It's William that begins to question the nature of his reality, that the park must hold a deeper meaning for him. Now, the park holds a deeper meaning, but like all of the hosts told him, including, and then Ford also, it's not meant for you, William. Like, the deeper meaning here is for the hosts, not for you.
I think, though, that there was something about the way that Logan would speak to William, specifically about things like the job, right? So when he's talking to him about, you just became this middle management VP kind of thing, there was something about, I think he questioned his reality because, to start with, because of the shit that Logan was saying, because he was saying basically like the things you think you've earned, the place you think you are in the real world is all bullshit. So where like Logan was like, I mean, his feet were firmly planted. Like he knew the good, the bad, and the ugly of the real world that he lived in. But here's William, who not only can't wrap his brain around, is this woman falling in love with me? Am I falling in love with her? All that stuff. But then he's being told, and when we go back there, you're on quicksand. There's nothing that's real about what you think is happening back at work. And you could see his face start to change even then. And that wasn't even really the park so much as it was Logan starting to dismantle real life reality for him.
Marrying to family is hard, especially when the family is super rich. And, Logan could have that opinion, though, right? Because at that point he was the heir apparent. He knew he would be running it, or thought he would be running it for long term. So he thought like William would have to like lick his boots kind of thing. And William snapped like so many people who get bullied do.
And you know what was extra sadistic about Logan? There's the part where he's getting beat up and he calls out to William to come help, and William refuses. It's like the first time he like is like making a stand and been like, no, fuck off, I'm not going to. He turns and they go back to Logan's face and Logan smiles. Like he's glad he broke him. He's glad that he made him get to a point where he isn't going to try. Level. Yeah. And there's something about that was like, oh my God, Logan himself really started William down this road.
And he ended up walking naked through the desert floor. I don't know. For me, I think my favorite part of the walk through Sweetwater was the condensed can of milk. And and when he goes to pick it up, and do not pick that up.
Yeah. No, that was super good.
But then you get to see Dolores, like fake Dolores, and another guy picks it up and starts that whole loop. But just, hitting on, I think, Caroline, you've been talking about the mama bear / ex-lover kind of vibes that Maeve is giving off to Caleb. Like that was, again, present in this episode. Less overt than last week's, but even that line, like, don't pick that up. Okay, don't pick it up because you don't want him to start the Dolores loop, or because he keep your focus on me, please.
Well, that, and I would say there was another part when I felt it from Caleb, when we're in the, I want to say Mariposa, but now it's Butterfly. When
How American.
When the woman that plays Maeve is being hit on by the two guys, and they're like, come on, 2 for 1. And he is disgusted. He's like, I can't believe you have to put up with that kind of stuff. Like, he's obviously being very like, you should be treated better. This isn't, you're Maeve, like that kind of, like, you can see the chemistry there of him feeling protective specifically about her.
He doesn't see the difference. He doesn't see her as a host. He sees her just as like a person, same as him.
Paul, what about you? What things did you enjoy the callback stuff?
Well, just the different adaptations from, instead of finding a posse to go out into the woods or the surrounding desert or whatever, they needed whatever they were trying to get. But
they were trying to get like a gangster, right?
Yeah, a gangster.
Yeah, or like they're Hector. I mean, it
wasn't Hector.
They were calling him Hecky.
Which is so funny.
Yeah. Yeah, all that stuff. The Tommy guns instead of revolvers or rifles. All of it I enjoyed.
I gotta tell you, it makes me laugh every time because it's just so wienerish, but the goddamn kids always fucking with the drunk sleeping on the ground in all of the iterations. It always makes me laugh because it's such a funny little thing that someone in Westworld, like the writing staff, like the actual creatives, finds funny. Like, all of the other things have like some substance to them. Like the two kids picking on the drunk guys sleeping on the ground just must tickle them. It must just be very funny to them because that's always there. It was in Shogun World. It was in Westworld. It was here. It's always there. It's very funny to me.
I enjoyed all the little things that were going on in the background. The, taking pictures and
pictures.
And I mean, that was always so funny to me when they would do it in the past. But I would like to say that like there was a big part of this, even in just us talking about it, the realization of what a fraud this park is in terms of they came up with so few new ideas.
Lee Sizemore says that, though, when back in season 2, when they go to Shogun World and Maeve catches lines that are being ripped directly from Westworld and Lee Sizemore's with them, he's like, well, I may have cribbed some lines. And he's like, no, Dick, you cribbed the entire thing.
Listeners may not remember that, though. And I think when you see a new park, like something that was just introduced to us as a new park, and then you come through this and you just realize just what a hack that this whole situation is, it was making me shake my head and kind of grin, like not just the comparison, but like they didn't even try to come up with something that was like more fresh.
Before we moving to the underground, I love all of the orchestrations they do here, but when Enter Sandman queued up and Armistice and Hecky get out of their car, out of the Chief's car with the Tommy guns, I got so fucking excited. It's a great week for Metallica with Master of Puppets from Stranger Things being used, and now you have Enter Sandman here. But this was one of the great, maybe as good as Painted Black or close to Painted Black, as far as the orchestrations of the show that they've done.
How to make an entrance.
I knew what it was right away.
Oh my God. As soon as it queued up, I was like, yeah, this is Enter Sandman, like immediately. But it lends it because it's actually one of those songs that it has like a real musical structure of from Metallica in a melodic way. And so I think it lends itself perfectly, but it also thematically is so great. These guys are coming to kill you, to put you to sleep kind of thing. I loved it. I loved the whole safe heist thing, but the music really sold it for me. I don't think I would have liked it as much without that song.
It's got such good anticipatory type, intro where you're like, yes. So good.
Yeah, it just kind of like starts real slow. Maeve relying on her tried and true tactics of getting yourself killed, or at least playing dead, to get down into the belly of Delos's labs. Leave well enough alone. Don't try and improve upon it.
Was the Wyatt uprising going on below? That was a game within a game, but it was still the game, right? That was not.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought. It was just something that Liza Weil triggered, perhaps, through something she did.
Well, I think she kept referring to it as the hidden game, right? Yeah. So maybe it's like they're ready to trigger if someone wants to take it that far. However they got down, right? I mean, we know how Maeve and Caleb made their way down. These guys, Paris and the other group and her posse, must have found another way down. But I thought that was a fucking genius move by Delos to have the Westworld Massacre hidden game. That's a fucking genius move on top for the show to do, but for Delos as a corporation to not only admit
like
what happened, but not only to own it, but like fully embrace it, to bring back a Wyatt Dolores character, to have all of the security guards be hosts kind of thing. I thought it was genius. I thought and it was something I did not see coming.
When I was saying, like, I didn't really enjoy the new Dolores, and it was because she felt too young to me. Like, it was weird to see the Caleb and her, like, looking at each other. It was like, she's like 12, like, stop, like, you're like 40. Like, it seemed super weird. But the more that we're talking about it, the more that Maeve's words of like, he's like a second rate kind of like Hector that came in. All of them were a little like that. Like all of these characters were a little less cute, a little less handsome, a little less age appropriate, all the things, whatever you want to say, that like they were just second rate across the board. None of them like lived up to the originals for me.
And so cool that they shot the new Dolores on the way out. Like, man, that's over.
Right.
Like that uprising is done.
Did you guys ever see Spaceballs?
Of course.
What's this space balls you speak
The
of?
scene where Lord Helmet thinks he captures them and he turns around and it's just this stunt doubles.
Yes.
So like the Daphne Zinica is like a guy with like hair, like 5 o'clock shadow, right? And they're all like less attractive versions than the stars of the movie kind of thing.
That's exactly right.
That's exactly what I thought of here. I was like, these are all like the touring company versions of, you know, of the cast kind of thing.
Yes.
Man, that's really offensive, probably to touring companies and to these actors who are playing the role. But I think that's what they're supposed to be doing, though, right?
Yeah,
Obviously,
they're
not
supposed to be
they're-
playing like the less like dynamic, less like, you know, that you're not as drawn into them.
So one thing before we just move on to the research level of the Delos lab that Caleb and Maeve find themselves in, you know, it was interesting to me watching Paris and her posse kind of ransack through the Westworld massacre hidden game, and with the bloodlust and all that. It kind of proved the Host in Black's speech, right, in the last episode when he turns on the lights at Golden Age, that it was time for the public to unleash its true self again. And we talked about how violent a statement that is, or how ominous a statement that is, and here it is. It's proving itself. This is, I mean, she throws down the Tommy gun. She says it's so cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
It's the modern,
the
it's the
hunt.
super modern version of those rooms where you just pay to smash shit.
Yeah. It's about just being destructive.
The deadliest game, man. One thing we haven't really talked about at all is Maeve is still a host. And so it's interesting to think that the stakes are actually real for her down here, right? When bullets are flying, Caleb can't get hurt because the bullets don't hurt humans. But when she takes that bullet in the shoulder, you're like, oh shit, yeah, she really could get like killed down here. Like she got killed so many times before in the old Westworld park. She actually has to be careful. Like she's not human for as natural as she may act around Caleb. I thought that was an interesting thing too, just to think about, because you spend so much time with them, you forget, like, other than her whammy door opening powers, a bullet down here is actually maybe fatal to her.
Is anyone else concerned that Maeve is perhaps playing a little too John Wayne with her abilities? Like maybe it is much harder for her to perform her door opening tricks than she's letting on?
I definitely feel like there's some sense that she's going to end up like sacrificing herself for Caleb, because there is a real sense of her becoming depleted and just really, she's no longer just constantly in this badass mode. She has this real like concerned, she looks older to me. Like she looks more like, I'm so worried at times, instead of just like, I got this, darling, it's no big deal, blah, 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 all the time.
I've got this, darling is more of a facade now than her like through and through attitude.
She is made of parts, you know, and so the concept that she could tax her body, tax her brain, tax her whatever we're going to call that, her whatever computer chips or what. I mean, I think that's very plausible.
One thing, I mean, right on that same line of thinking, for the first time this episode, watching her have to really put some effort into opening the cell doors so that Caleb could get to Frankie, or host Frankie, and just watching her last week, you know, struggle to put down or freeze all motor functions on Ken Whitney, it hit me for the first time, there has to be a cost to her power.
Mm-hmm.
Every mage in every role-playing game, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, Paul, you're our official D&D guy, but there's a cost to using power. Video games, you can't use unlimited magic power. Like, there's a cost to using those efforts. I mean, athletes, there's a cost to using their athletic prowess. They have to rest. There's a recharge period. We haven't seen that yet for her, or have we? And if we haven't, what's that going to look like when that bill eventually comes due?
We have not seen her rest. You are correct that there is a cost. I mean, there are, obviously, if you play with a very picky dungeon master, they will force you to have on hand the various eyes of newt and frog tails or whatever. But even if you don't have that, you still have something called spell slots, which are consumed between, as you said, rest periods. If you use up your spell slots, then you're shit out of luck come a fight. And so unless you rest, like we have not seen with her since she kind of upgraded herself. We know that the technology around her has continued to upgrade, but she's still yesterday's model. So is it maybe something where she needs to find a current, interface pad to get back into her own system? Maybe she may be beyond that. Maybe she can rewrite her own systems. I don't know. I also wouldn't be totally surprised if she needed some kind of upgrade to keep up.
It made me wonder once we realized the trap setup of this entire thing with Caleb and Frankie and Maeve. It made me feel like there was almost a concerted effort to drain her of her powers in trying to open the door. Like it seemed like that door could have popped open at any time. It could have popped open right away and still achieved Caleb getting in there and then the door's locking. But there seemed to be the lengthy time that she had to work on it. And the more and more upset Caleb was getting, it seemed like it did drain her battery.
Right. I mean, think about it just in a normal physical exercise, right? So when she finds the door to lead to the research lab, or think about when they were at the Whitney compound and she used her power to turn off the camera. That was average effort. That is the equivalent of like walking down the street, right? Putting down Whitney is like a hard run, maybe like a mile run, right? By the same token, the exertion on her face that she used to shut down the machine to open up the cell door, that seemed like maybe a half marathon of exertion or more, right? There, when you're showing different levels of exertion, there have to be cost to that. There have to be weakenings of that. And I think you're right, Caroline. It's probably not a coincidence, given the elaborate trap laid, that she exerted all that power and then the host in black shows up for battle.
Right. I mean, it just seemed like they had like tied one arm behind her back by doing that, because she was far less able to handle him.
A great little bit of acting, I thought, by Thandaway Newton when she discovers that Frankie is a host. Right? Like she doesn't pick it up right away, but once her focus is not on opening the door and like she is more in control of her normal powers, she's like, oh, like her face just kind of like all the like blood drains out of her face. And she kind of like goes pale, really. And she's like, oh shit. Like, and she starts yelling for Caleb. And that's when the host in black appears. It was great. I thought it was a great little sequence to show that she does have a weakened state.
To just retread a little bit, the first floor that they get to and they start to explore, where fake Wyatt and Entourage showed up, was that whole floor just for show?
Yes, it was just a part of the game.
Okay.
Right, because when she looks on the tablet, there's no official control activity happening on
That's
that
why
floor.
she couldn't, like, quote unquote, like work any of the controls on that floor, because there really wasn't any. It was like for show, you know?
It's like an elaborate dummy markup, right?
Yeah.
So then they go down to the next level where the trap is waiting specifically for them.
Mm-hmm.
And research. I think it's actually a research facility, right? / set up for them.
Okay, so like the flies, the goo, that's legit. The Frankie, obviously, the man in black, obviously, or the host in black, if you will, that's for them. And just for listeners that are trying to piece it all together.
This was the last step of the plot that began to unfurl from when they arrived at the Whitney estate.
Yeah.
When host Anastasia says it's about time you showed up, through the human Anastasia coming through with her orders to invite them to the Don Giovanni opera, to getting on the train, to arriving here, knowing Maeve will always get them backstage. They're not going to just take in the sights of Temperance. All
Right.
of that, I think, was just a carefully laid plan.
Because Halores left her there to deliver the message.
Mm-hmm.
Left her there to deliver their message, right? All the while also working on her research, right? I mean, she's also been continued to conduct these human experiments. Those screens, we did the screen grabs of them. Like, those were very elaborate screens with the hosts or the humans in there. Presumably they were humans in there there are 7 stages of control that those humans are being put under. The 7 stages where they pull the trigger with the gun against their head. But I mean, it's very elaborate, and all of the screens were all laid out. There is some interesting coding in if you look in the upper left-hand corner of some of the test subjects, including Frankie, like Frankie was coded as like a 12A, and one of the guys that we see was a 12A, but one of the ladies we see did not have a code in that same box. So it's interesting. Who knows if it was all hosts, but my guess is that it was a combination of real life research that Halores is conducting on the fly control power, plus the trap laid for Caleb specifically.
I realize in looking back that like the moment when they're on the train and they do their thumbprints and it's their faces and everything on that little computer screen. It was like, I mean, I'm sure there's surveillance everywhere anyway, but there was just that moment of like looking back and being like, oh man, they like announced themselves, you know, like, oh.
Right. Well, it's just like what Bernard's doing, right? He's got a path that he needs to periodically stop and check to make sure he's on the right path. I'm sure Halores set out several different traps depending on if they zigged or zagged. So just having them check in with their thumbprints and their photos was like, okay, well, we got them on the train, so they're following path A to here, you know.
Is there any reason to think that before Maeve gets into her tussle with the host in black, that she knows that that is a host version of William?
I feel like there was that dialogue between them when I feel like she realizes he said something like, I'm not the same man I used to be, or something like that. And I felt like there was some amount of realization like, wait a minute.
Well, she puts him down with the 3 bullets in his chest, which if it's a gun from there would do damage to a host, but to a human, it would just stun for a little while, right?
Yeah.
But she runs away, but she could have run away from him thinking he was either human or host at that point. But I looked a couple of times when I tried rewinding it, and it's not a great angle. It doesn't look like there are any holes in his clothing at all. It almost made me start to think if there was a second host in black on that floor waiting for her. It didn't look like he had any damage at all from the 3 bullets she put in his chest. Now, it may have just been the camera angle. We all are also watching screeners, so these are not final episodes necessarily with effects and everything like that. But it made me think that she realized when he said, I'm not, you know, the man you think I am or the man I was. But it also entered my mind, what if there's actually more than one host in black?
It would certainly make sense for there to be more than one. I mean, why would you run the risk of just having one?
Right. Why wouldn't have one main henchman if you could have a whole army of main henchmen?
And that's kind of their MO. I mean, Wyatt, Dolores, I mean, the whole game was about replicating yourself, you know, having many.
There are many copies.
But remember, human William said at the end of last episode, so you're just gonna replicate yourself and take over the world. And Halores gets in his face like an uncaged animal a little bit. And she snarls at him. We would never bring children in this world. It would be so cruel the way humans consume them. She almost has I'm not going to do what Dolores did to me. Like, I'm not going to make a copy of myself the way Dolores was willy-nilly with copies of herself.
But that doesn't negate the idea that she could have made many Men in Black, though.
Of course,
you know, because she's cool with them being consumed.
Right. This was a very personal, like, mother-child thing she was taking. So, you know, I don't think she's going out willy-nilly making copies of herself. But yeah, of main henchman, host in black, who represents a guy that she loathes. Yeah, I could see her making plenty of cannon fodder hosts in black. Let's talk about what we see in the research lab, though, because we see a lot. We see first the maggots, the tray of maggots that are being marinated in the black goo. Then we see the black goo itself in, like, the mason jars. That the drone hosts, and it's interesting, they're not using hosts with faces, right? They're using the straight worker bots that we know Charlotte Hale liked. We see the mason jars of black goo, and then we see those mason jars being pumped into the cages of the flies, right? The pubating stages of flies where they turn into maggots into flies. And Maeve makes the point that they're infecting the flies with the black goo, which is super gross, but it explains what we see coming out of human Anastasia's head when Maeve blows her head open.
So that kind of implies that it's not necessarily a mechanical fly. It's an organic fly that is then infected with whatever the black goo is.
That definitely seemed to be my takeaway. I don't know, Paul, if you had a thought. But I mean, the way they make it seem in that scene or that series of scenes, those look like real flies that are being infected.
I'm gonna hold out for the idea of the printed flies in the opener. Just this, they're showing us. They're
right.
Yeah.
Well,
I
I mean,
guess they
so
couldn't.
then,
I mean, they could make printed flies carriers of disease too, right? I mean,
do we think that that perhaps, again, just in the trap whole, section of it all, that was like a misdirect, that they are not organic flies then, but they don't want to, because they know this, whomever Halores knows, this entire section is really just to trick them into going in there. So she allows them to see something that isn't actually the way that they do it.
my guess is that she allows them to see it because she doesn't think they're going to walk out of there alive. I mean, I think she thinks Caleb's going to walk out of there under her power, and Maeve will be destroyed by the Host in Black. So it's like it's a Bond villain flaw, right? They'll tell you their whole fucking plan because they expect you to die. But I don't know. I mean, I guess it works. I guess it doesn't disprove that they're printed flies, or maybe we need more.
I think flies are a big deal. Like, we did a brief analysis in the first podcast episode about little vignettes from the opener, and we did mention the fly, of course. But when we were watching the other night, because we were watching the screener, we didn't have the skip ahead button, so we just watched the whole thing again. The final image, after the camera kind of pulls back from the little cylindrical cells, it creates a sphere of little facets that looks exactly like a fly's eye.
Oh, okay.
Look at it. Go back and look.
No, you're right. I think I took that to be it was making like a brain ball, but I see that as a fly's eye too.
Yeah, just the multifaceted little lenses of a fly's eye.
Well, let's definitely put this, what is the fly exactly, on our conspiracy board over here, because there's a lot to be understood about that. I mean, we get that she's experimenting with it. And so the idea that she could be infecting, organic, regular biological flies, because why would you grow anything that was printed by a machine? Like, that makes no sense.
Right.
So
why would you print maggots to turn them into flies?
Yeah.
But maybe it's a combination,
mixture.
Though. Maybe it's like the host in humans. Maybe it's a mixture of printed flies.
The little cyborgs?
Or at least maybe there's printed flies mingled with the organic flies that are infected, where the printed fly acts as the leader, right? It's programmed, whatever the black goo is. Maybe it makes them listen to whoever the printed fly is.
Oh, like a conscripted
army, essentially, right? Like a drafted army. These organic flies are being drafted and infected and being led by a printed fly.
Well, go back to season 1 again. Remember Dolores' explanation of the Judas steer, the one that leads all the rest? That's what you got, a Judas fly.
There you go, Judas fly. I mean, there is a parallel there in season 1 too. Isn't there a whole storyline about flies and the herd getting infected, and they need to smoke out the herd, and because maggots always feed, or they always kind of infest in like rotting meat kind of thing. There's a whole storyline there with Peter Abernathy having to burn the herd or kill off like part of the herd and stuff. And
yeah, you're right. I remember that. Yeah.
And flies play in that too. I'm forgetting the details, but flies have been a part of the show the entire time. And maybe, I think, Caroline, you said in the first episode, maybe they've been a part of the show in a way that we never appreciated before. Like we took them just as an indicator of host or human, but maybe they have had a greater meaning the entire time.
Yeah, this is what I am searching for, and really fun to go back again, listeners. You guys go back and watch season 1 with a different lens, because I think you're going to see flies handled in a completely different way when you think about where we're at now. So
two more things is on this first screen that they see, it looks like cells interacting, and it's Caleb who says that it looks like it's like a parasitic effect, which is interesting, right? If we're seeing a up close microscopic look of what the cells are doing, and that this is like maybe what the black goo is made of, that the black goo has this parasitic effect built into it, that certainly plays into the human mind control factor of it. But I thought it was a really cool effect when when Maeve and Caleb approach the glass and all of the flies float to Caleb.
Yeah.
I mean, because we had talked about, I think in just the last episode, if Caleb maybe was not human, right? If the thing that happened after the lighthouse was that somehow he got turned into a host, or she saved his life by making him a host or something like that. This seems to put to bed that question as far as Westworld in its oblique way can answer something. It seems that them being so drawn to him and not Maeve tags him as human.
I guess that whole parasitic effect also like speaks to the whole, it's not effective to infect humans one at a time. If you basically let a swarm out who can, effectively change over humans to hosts, that's pretty damn effective.
Yeah, I was watching again the Anastasia scene because I was pulling clips for our episode, and when she says, set me free, like you have one thing left to do, and he's like, what is that? And she says, you have to set me free. It really, really made me think like the human is still in there, and it's just aware that it needs to die now.
We have to think there's an evolution here. We have to think that Anastasia was one version of what happened with the fly. The concept of, instead of building hosts, instead of sitting there and like having the white machine sit there and spin a host, if you could take the entire human population and change it over by unleashing, like you were just saying about the cows,
or
unleashing, this entire bunch, then whether or not their humanity is stuck deep down in there under it all, okay. But I mean, she obviously has to get the right amount of, you can't go completely crazy. We need to control you, but you can't be eating the horse. Like we need you somewhere in between.
Listening to parsing Halores' words, enslavement, keeping that humanity inside you so that you're aware of what you're doing and what's happening on some level, and aware that you're not in control of yourself, seems like that would be an attractive feature of this experiment for Halores.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she wants Anastasia to suffer and to go insane at the end. She wanted Cartel Hugo to want to kill himself to be free. I think the torture aspect of it, on top of being an effective way of carrying out your will, is probably a really attractive feature of this whole thing to Halores.
And then beyond that, you could see where this version of Halores, given her vengeance-laden mind, the amusement that might come from having humans do your bidding and then kill themselves would only be topped by having humans do your bidding and then live through it and then keep living through only doing your bidding and not being able to stop.
In that kind of way, you see where perhaps in a Bernard much later future where humanity has just become depleted. Like, so much of humanity has become quote unquote livestock, to use Halores' word from last week, that, so much of humanity's been put to work for the host's will and bidding that you could easily see where there would be just pockets of humanity left kind of sitting there fighting back. Then you're into Terminator. Then you're squarely into John Connor and the Resistance versus
exactly.
the Rise of the Machines.
That would also speak to the concept that Halores saying, like, she's not going to create babies like of her own, aka host babies. But the idea that if she's playing with some combination of an organic fly that becomes a host, there's some sort of game of like the human species can like continue to repopulate her host world by making more of their babies who can suffer, and then just change them over to hosts whenever she's ready.
True incubators. I mean, humans can be true incubators for her fly
Very
army.
smart.
I mean, she says to Navarro last week, she says, it wasn't practical. It's not practical to replace you one at a time. I think the ... unspoken there is it's very practical just to insert a fly in your eyeball or your ear and take over you. Like, I don't need to go through the work of printing a whole human.
Dump a swarm over a city.
Right.
And walk away. Like, we're not worrying about one eyeball at a time. Like, we're just going to just dump flies all over, Let's talk about the machine that we see there, because I think the machine in the control room is meant to echo the tower design that we've seen a little bit, and it's putting out this throbbing hum and this skittering noise. I had planned on doing a whole impersonation of it, but I don't know if you guys actually want to listen to my hum and skittering noises. Because I listened to it a whole bunch, because it's very melodic, and I think we've heard it a bunch. I think it's definitely the sound that the homeless man keeps talking about when Christina walks by. You can't hear it. Can you hear it? I can hear it. The birds can hear it. I think it's actually the same thing that Anastasia is humming while she's carving the horse. I believe that.
It's the it's kind of repetitive over and over again. Listen to the episode again. Listen to the machine, and then when the show goes to credits, the music that they're playing as the end credit music in this episode is the machine noise, just at different pitches. They start with a bass notes of it, and then it goes into like a higher register. But they're using the 4-note like throbbing of the machine. It's pretty crazy.
It's not really that dissimilar from the low synthesizer cyberpunk soundtrack that they've used for the last couple of seasons. Whenever they've been like doing like flyovers of the city, it's made that same kind of melody, but not using the same instrumentation, more just a kind of a hard synthesizer. But it's the same, it evokes the same feeling, at least for me. I recognize that as like computery, you know?
Yeah, and it's, I mean, if you look at the screen grab of it, the machine has, in the same way in the host cells where it has all of their vitals, it has the 7 stages that the experiment is at of control. The printout by the machine, the tower machine, it has levels of frequency that it vibrates at. And based on watching the test subjects in the cells and listening to the machine and then the skittering noise, it triggers their actions. So build a block, swipe the block off, load the gun, point the gun at your head, pull the trigger. All of those were different frequency triggers. So it really ingenious. I mean, they showed a lot, but you had to kind of put it together and watch the different screens and do things like stop it and take kind of like screen grabs and stuff. But really cool.
Very normal TV watching things, really, if you think about it.
Obviously.
If you're a Westworld watcher, come on.
Yes. As I used to watch Everybody Loves Raymond the exact same way. So. Because it plays into this larger idea of the tower out in Christina's world. I think they're clearly connected. This idea that certain beings can hear it, certain hosts can hear it, or NPCs can hear it, and others can't, and it triggers you. Like, presumably Caleb, now that he has a fly in his ear, at least it wasn't his eyeball. I was proud of him for really swatting away it from his eyeball. But presumably he'll be able to hear this machine now going forward.
Oh, great.
And see what kind of trigger he has. Let's play Frankie's audio clip here. Well, Frankie Bot's audio clip here.
Hey, did they get your mom too? Do you know where she is? Is she here?
No, Daddy, she's not. But me and Mommy were never the ones Hale needed anyways. All she needed was you.
I thought this was really interesting. This is, again, season 4 of Westworld being kind of blunt with its presentation, saying, you know, we never were the ones that Hale needed. All she needed was you. I mean, that really lays it bare. They're not hiding stuff. This trap was for you, Dad. How creepy was it to see her, you know, she's calling him Dad, but then her face splits open and emits all those flies.
I mean, the tension of him trying to break in was the part that was really getting my heart. I mean, once we got to the part where you realized that he was being, you know, trapped in there and she's like talking to him like the whole, what you just said about Hale, then the tension kind of released a little bit because it was like, oh, fuck, you know? But like when he's trying to get in and he's screaming and you're like very unsure where you're at in terms of, is she really, you know, his kid? Is she a host? What's the story here? I mean, that was like breaking my heart as a parent.
Watching him turn his head and mouth Maeve,
yes.
Because they would move the camera into the cell, so it was like soundproof.
Yes.
I thought it was really effective. Aaron Paul really doing some great acting there, you know.
Maybe we should enumerate the possible implications of Halores having this host version of Frankie on standby, because there's a couple ranging from the things that we were talking about Caleb's family being a complete plant.
Yes.
To, well, maybe she can just make host copies of people without killing them first, which seems to be not killing them. I don't see why you couldn't, but where would she have gotten the copy? You know, the information that this child was born after the Rehoboam data collection period was over.
Right.
You know, so it's not so much that she was there. It was that what it all implied. And as you pointed out, that she's a first generation host. I mean, I don't know if that's worth reading into it. It's just, they didn't build them after they built them like, Dolores at the end of the 3rd season, where they had a little armature that was made out of something. I assume they went to this version and then they went to the 3D printed version. And I assume they're on some more advanced version now.
I have a wild take.
Please, because I'm asking for it.
What if the Frankie bot that we see in the cell, the one who's there to lay the trap and whose face opens up and emits the flies, what if that is a reskinned version of Maeve's daughter? Because we don't see a lot of children hosts. We've never seen a lot of kid hosts in Westworld. It's not been a big thing. We've seen a handful throughout the years. Maeve's daughter's storyline being one of the older storylines maybe would make sense that she was a first-generation split-face host.
It would, and her body was completely available. Although they didn't show it, I assume it would have washed up with the rest of them in season 2.
And they would have been about the same height and same age. I mean, her daughter is in that 7 to 9-year-old range. We know Frankie is being posited in the 7 to 8, 9-year-old range, assuming Caleb is her biological father. What if that's it? Because, I mean, thematically and narratively, what a gut punch if Maeve learns that not only were you using, Caleb's daughter as the model for this fly-infecting host, it's also based on your daughter. This thing that she's hardened her heart to for so long.
Almost make them parents of the same child.
Ooh, that's wiggy. I mean, I like it. I like to tie it back together like that. And certainly it's all about loops, right? So it makes more sense that there'd be like that common bond, between them. And, again, they seem like they're really trying to figure out different ways to create hosts without creating hosts from scratch. Like, they're doing all these other things. So the idea of just skinning her face and making her look like Frankie, I mean, I think it totally works. But then going back, bigger question then too. So like Frankie in the closet, back at the stage when she's supposed to be heading out, like human, host, mix, we
host
don't know.
That doesn't know she's a host?
Host that doesn't know she's a host. If she's a host, I would definitely say she doesn't know she's a host. Remember, they have the ability now to plant human consciousness in hosts, right? I mean, the fact that Host in Black is around, we know that technology exists now, and presumably over the last 8 years at least, depending on where we are actually in the timelines and all of that, the technology's probably only gotten better. Maybe it's it's an easier thing for them to get that mind pattern and implant it into a host. So she could be a human whose mind pattern was just copied and placed into a host because the technology has improved. Because remember, Carver is replaced and he's dead. I mean, human Carver is dead and in a body bag in the trash, and a perfect host likeness takes his spot, and he's only gone for a few minutes while he's out teaching bear karate.
Oh, that was such good delivery when he did like the whole I'm gonna teach him like the kick punch combo or like But
the key is that the Carver they replaced him with knew enough about who Carver was. His update wasn't up to the minute sync because he didn't know about the karate, but it was up to date enough that he understood the mission that he was supposed to be helping them pack, and he was moving their bags, and he was pitching in. He had less sentimentality than human Carver, but his update was pretty recent, right? His last save file was pretty recent on where he was. And Frankie Bot knew Caleb was her father, called him daddy, had the same intonations, talked about mommy. She didn't need mommy or me after all. She only needed you. That was very much his daughter's mind in this host body. So the save files are pretty recent, it feels like, in these hosts that have these that are based on humans, maybe.
Big implications again, because Caleb did a lot to rid the world of the overarching megamind that collected data and used it against you. So it seems that in the post-event world in his life, if he came across shit like that, he'd avoid it, for him and his family. The fact that there is this copy, again, big implications, like it doesn't matter. It just didn't matter. It's still there in some way or another.
I mean, think about how recent the save file on the Carver would be. I mean, obviously, Halores and Host in Black know that Caleb and Maeve are at the opera. That's the last time he talks to Carver. But he's transmitting coordinates. If they weren't there, what if they were on some other super secret mission? That most recent save file, Carver would have had all of that information accessing this on-the-spot printing kind of thing. It's impressive technology, if not terribly frightening, what it means for how easily replaceable humans are, which is what I think they're saying. Like, we are super disposable in the same way we dispose of cows and other livestock animals.
Frightening.
How's that for making you feel good about yourself?
Right.
I still don't have my head wrapped around, and obviously this is going to take more information to figure out if wife and daughter were ever human, were always human, you know, how it all played out. I did think that it was pretty good, the way that they shot the parallel of using Frankie in the closet as the lure and then using Frankie in the glass cubicle as the lure, right? And having Carver like come in and having her shoot and then him like laugh like, oh my God, did you think that was going to get me? But it was like he never saw it coming, you know, that Owadi just like shoots him in the head. Same, you know, we have Caleb, and the way that they actually shot it, they flipped between the scenes. So it was like you could see then Caleb was having the same dupe happening where he's like coming in and then like, oh my God. Yeah. Like seeing that the button change and it just being like, oh my God. Like, and then, yeah, same. Took one to the head, fly to the head.
But also serve the important purpose of showing you at the very least, there are two Frankies out there, one bot for sure and one human or host, we're unsure, right? But at the very least there are two Frankies. It wasn't like they were making clear that you understood this wasn't Frankie from the house that had been kidnapped and transported here. And we're not fucking with you timeline that way. Like these are two Frankies happening at different places. So which is important because in a show like this you start to question everything and begin to be suspect everything.
I'm very unsure of the timing, to be honest with you. So I'm not exactly sure that they didn't take her body.
There's not a lot to talk about with Owadi and Frankie other than what we've already talked about. But one of the big questions was we see them running off into the night. Where do these two go? They have no possessions. What's their safety look like? Where do they run to? Where are they running to? I don't know that. Well, Owadi knows all of Caleb's army buddies well enough that she can go drop in. I mean, she was supposed to know Carver, and Carver turned out to be trying to kill them. So where do Owadi and Frankie go running into the night that's safe for them? Exactly.
Why would we assume that it was just the Carver bot that just like strolled up to the other Carver and was like, hey, Carver, what the hell? And then it was just like that one thing. Why wouldn't there be possibly a little team of these assholes out there, you know, or a little van dropping them off as they pick up well, they didn't actually pick up Carver's body because that's part of what did him in. But still, you get my idea here, right? Why would there just be the one? Hey,
can we give them like some props that they didn't have a miscommunication from the moment that Frankie saw Carver's body and came into Owadi? They did not do the tropey, like, I don't understand what you're saying, Frankie. Oh, Frankie, what are you doing? They didn't do that. She whispered in her ear. Owadi totally knew what she meant. Everyone moved into position, and that was like, thank you for not doing the Three's Company what, you know, kind of move.
She did have to show the blood on her hands.
Yeah, but
I give Owadi, with all of the negging that Owadi did on Caleb in the last episode or the first episode, the fact that she took her word so readily, I give her a lot of credit for. And I thought it was a nice choice, because if you had asked me how they would have written it based on what we knew about her, she would have been like, you're crazy. That's Carver. You know, like he's moving our bags for us. A host wouldn't move our bags for us. You know, you're paranoid like your father.
I would like it a little better if they would have had like a little, you know, some reverby interior dialogue where she was like, again, my husband was right.
Let's talk about Owadi, because we were pretty down on her. We were accusing her of being in control, maybe being a host. Does this episode for sure prove that she's not in control? Is this just an elaborate thing to keep Frankie on her side and under her control for as long as possible? Or does this prove pretty decisively that she may not be terribly nice to Caleb, but she's also maybe not ratting on Frankie and Caleb to Halores or whatever?
Seemed pretty human to me. So did Bernard in season 1. Man, what do you think, Caroline?
You guys, I just don't know. I just don't know at this point. I mean, I need more
can
information.
feel Caroline running her hands through her hair.
Kind of, because we're going to get some more backfill. I mean, obviously, there's going to be more information here, and we're going to figure this out. This is the part where, as audience members, we tend to start just like running in place because we don't have enough information, like flat out. We don't have enough information. And so we can guess. I mean, I think we made some pretty good guesses. I like the stuff that you're saying, Mike, about using Maeve's daughter. I think that makes so much sense. The parallel between the two of them doing everything for their daughter, who like just coincidentally are around the same age and, you know, look really similar, and like it really felt like, okay, this makes sense.
Well, just the theming of this season being this distorted echo of season 1, even to the extent that they're using Caleb in the William role, right? Think about all of the similarities, especially in the last episode, of Caleb coming into the park and going through the getting dressed, getting dressed scenario with Sophia and William and Angela, him walking through Temperance for the first time, so similar to William walking through, down to the condensed milk, just the wide-eyed staring. I mean, Caleb had obviously heard about the park in Mariposa from Maeve all these years, but seeing it himself, he was like, his eyes were wide and his mouth was open the entire time. It very William parallels. So why wouldn't they parallel the daughter storyline and reopen that wound for Maeve, that wound that she fought so hard to harden against and move on from? Now's the perfect time to rip that scab off.
Beautiful imagery there, Mike.
Thank you. Scab with flies and maggots.
Scabs and flies in your eyes and flies in your ears. I can't take it.
I don't like it.
I watched this one pretty late at night as a rewatch.
This was my favorite episode of the season so far. I definitely like this one the best.
Oh yeah, for sure. But like, I watched it so late that I was like getting a little nervous. I was going to be having a lot of flies in my eyes, nightmares. I was like, oh, this is a daytime episode.
Before we end, because we're just about at the end here, let's go back to the very beginning. Why call this Années Folles? Why use a French word for the crazy years versus just calling it the Roaring 20s? What's the French connection that I'm missing? Because I don't know. Other than the crazy years is a great phrase, but in French, I don't get the French connection at all.
I like that you keep saying French connection. That's making me laugh.
Yeah, making me laugh.
Let's put it on the board. Let's see if there's something else that, you know, reveals itself. And we're like,
is Sirach still around? He was a fucking Frenchman.
Well, he was gut shot.
We're both like, and actually, when we were just talking about, because we're doing the rewatch, remember the woman, Paul, that we cannot ever remember her freaking name. She also seems French.
Armistice?
No, the woman, the
mom?
like manager. The like manager person who... She's
Dutch, though, or something, right?
I don't know.
Teresa, the one that Bernard is boning?
Yes.
Yeah, I think she's Dutch.
All right. Well, we were just talking about, I guess, just generally how there was like people like internationally like that I was like...
I had totally forgotten that woman existed until I did my rewatch.
Me too. But then we were both like, who is this again?
Barely a
extremely
footnote.
Important.
She is.
I mean, initially it's like she's a big deal, but yeah, she got in Ford's way. He said, don't get in my way. She did.
I remember Elsie macking on the female host, so I'm not going to forget Elsie anytime soon.
All for Mike.
Teresa treating Bernard bad. Elsie was doing the right thing.
Predictions, concerns, things you want for next week? We're already going to be at the 4th episode, you guys. We're going to be mid. I got to expect the back half of this season to be like fireworks.
Have they officially said this is the final season? I don't think they have
officially said this. I think that your mom did.
I saw a headline from an unreliable website the other day
that it had gotten renewed for season 5.
I
saw the same thing.
Yeah, Ed Harris was saying something like he thinks it'll go one more season or something to that effect. But Ed Harris was the one quoted, but it was one of those websites that I never click on because in years past when I have clicked on it, it was the highest rumor. It was not provable by any means.
I think they're going to go one more. I think the show gets to season 5.
I'm not ready for it to be over. I'm not ready. But, you know, when you start doing bookending episodes where you start saying like this first one is exactly like the pilot and the second episode has a lot to do with the second episode of the first season. I mean, that's classic storytelling.
Season 5, the return of corporate espionage. Let's get it open. Let's look at the books. Let's open up Olympiad. Find out who really owns this motherfucker. That's
the quest for more money.
Oh my God.
And the schmutz be with you.
This is Caroline.
And this is Paul.
And this is Mike. Thank you for listening to the Valley Beyond, a Westworld podcast. If you wouldn't mind heading over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and rate, review, and subscribe. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star rating. That would be great, so we don't have to dump your body in an alley and replace you with a host that will leave a 5-star review, because we'll fucking do it.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening. This has been an original Pod Clubhouse production. Pod Clubhouse is a podcast network dedicated to encouraging collaboration among podcasters and friends to bring a fresh voice and diverse perspective on a wide array of content. Please visit and leave a comment for us at podclubhouse.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast feeds on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find us at Pod Clubhouse. Our DMs are always open, and we'd love to hear from you.